Okay. So before we begin the actual substantive discussion, I'll just remind you again of some of the logistics of the pre-convention period. This is a period of general discussion across the party. And there are several ways of participating. Besides these actual discussions, you can send written submissions in to the pre-convention bulletins, and they will be published and distributed to the whole party across the whole country. You can also write resolutions to submit to the provincial nominating convention, which we are going to hold on June 5th. That's a Sunday. And I'm assuming, we haven't set the hours exactly, but I'm assuming it's going to take up the better part of an afternoon. Sunday, June the 5th. And at that convention, we will be electing delegates to the convention. Alberta is entitled to 3 delegates. We'll also elect 2 alternates. In case any of the elected delegates is unable to attend, the alternates can step up to replace them. We can, at that meeting, we can also nominate people to be elected as members of the Central Committee, the Audit Committee, or the Appeals Committee, which are all elected at the Central Convention. So we can send in, we can create nominations at that meeting to send into the Central Convention. And at the same time, we also want to do some provincial level business as well, which is to elect a new Alberta committee. I don't want to call it exactly a provincial committee because we're not, I don't think we are at the level of political organization that we could have a full-fledged political provincial committee that really provides political leadership. But we do obviously need coordination amongst the different clubs in the different parts of the province. So the existing coordinating committee is recommending that we have an expanded committee for that purpose because our membership is expanding, and the work that hopefully they will do will also expand. So we're actually going to suggest that there should be 2 people from each club elected to be that coordinating committee for the province over the next period of time, the next 3 years, presumably. So we're going to be asking in each of the clubs to actually consider this question of who they would like to put forward to be club representatives on that committee. We would have I think, an election at that meeting on the 5th. So these people would be elected on a province-wide basis, but presumably, a good deal of weight would be given to the recommendations that come from each club. We're now in the rather happy situation that we have so many new members that not everybody knows everybody else in the party. So we have to rely upon the clubs to speak for themselves about who they think would be their best representatives. So in order to help have that meeting run smoothly, we're going to ask that if people wish to submit written resolutions for consideration at that provincial nominating meeting, that they get them submitted a week ahead of time. So we're giving an effective deadline, more or less, of May 29th for resolutions from clubs or from individuals. These resolutions can be in the form of proposed suggestions for the contents of the political report, the main report that's going to be adopted, or they could actually be on other topics like special topics that would not necessarily be part of the report. But by and large, historically, a lot of the resolutions have taken the form of being proposed amendments to the proposed draft document so that they would be considered within the context of the overall political debate that happens at the Central Convention. I'll also just remind you that in order to be eligible to be a delegate, you must have been a member of the party for at least a year. So each club will have to consider who within their clubs falls in that category. And to be eligible to be nominated for the Central Committee, I think it's 2, you have to have been a member for 2 years. to be eligible to be nominated to the appeals committee or the audit committee, you must have been a member of the party for at least 5 years. The audit committee, it generally is composed of people who live within easy distance of the location of the central office, which is Toronto. So in fact, that's a technical committee, which is going to, oversee the bookkeeping. So, but the appeals committee is a set of people who are elected in case of any appeals having to be dealt with by the party, which is when so anyone is actually challenging a decision that's been made by one of the leading bodies in between conventions. It's usually, most of the time, the appeals committee, in fact, has nothing to do. It's certainly the exception rather than the rule that there will be any appeals. But given its nature, the idea is that the most experienced veteran members of the party should be the ones eligible to be on that committee. So with all those provisions for how, that there are many other ways to still participate in this discussion by written submissions to the pre-convention bulletin and by submitting resolutions for our June 5th meeting. I'd like to now just go on to actually talking about the second half of the draft document. I hope everyone has had a chance to read it. This is the section that deals with the actual concrete conditions in Canada, the state of the struggle, the state of the movements, the involvement of our party with those movements, and the internal state of the party, conditions within the party, and our in a very general terms, our plans for work within the party. So I just want to touch on a few of the points. I'm not going to go through that whole second half of the document and sort of repeat everything that's in there. I just want to draw attention to what I think are a few salient points. One is, this section actually begins with reiterating the problem of the war in the Ukraine and the war propaganda, which is part of the NATO involvement in that war, and reiterating once again what a terrible thing war is, not just in and of itself, but what a setback it is, an imperialist war is, to the whole working class movement and all the progressive movements. That war propaganda is really, since it's designed to cultivate, crude nationalist and chauvinistic sentiments and a crude kind of xenophobia, the demonizing of an enemy. It is just by its very nature, it works against any kind of class consciousness. It's really a direct attack upon class consciousness to try to promote that kind of nationalist fervor, which is part and parcel of war propaganda. And it's not just in terms of propaganda, but in practical terms as well. That war spending, every dollar spent on war is money taken away from social programs, from spending on the restructuring of the economy, spending on climate mitigation, spending on improving social services, health or education or daycare, and spending on war and war materials is also a way of very directly increasing the transfer of wealth from the society as a whole into the corporate sector, because the military industrial complex is some of the most monopolized sections of the whole economy. So war spending, in fact, is a really big way of increasing the concentration of wealth in fewer and fewer hands and removing it from being in the realm where working class people and working class movements can have any influence over how it's spent. So from an ideological point of view and from a fiscal point of view, war is really a catastrophe for the mass movements. It disarms the movements ideologically. It distracts people from the legitimate campaigns and demands that they should be putting forward. and it robs the whole society of the resources to implement progressive reforms. So it's it's not a coincidence that the communists are always very much opposed to imperialist war, always have been, always will be. So I'm not going to try to talk about the whole document. I just wanted to touch on a couple of the paragraphs in it, which I think are particularly important. The next section talks about the trade union movement, about all kinds of strikes that have occurred across the country, in different regions of the country over the last few years. A lot of them are in the health and education sector. And it's not that surprising, because those sectors are in fact under attack from reactionary governments at the federal level and the provincial level. And I'll also draw your attention to paragraph 141, which talks about union density in the public and the private sector. Union density means basically what percentage of the workforce is organized into unions. And it's not high in Canada as in comparison with a lot of the world. And it's in fact been in decline in Canada. The counter tendency of a slight improvement in union density has been mostly in the public sector. The private sector is in fact still suffering from a decline in union density. This is not really all that surprising. Right? I mean, when we look at the just the trends of new technology and the trends of automation and so on, it's going to be an ongoing trend that less and less actual job positions are going to be available in the production of commodities, of physical commodities, because as those jobs are simply more and more automated, or even automated out of existence. So the jobs that remain, just what remains becomes proportionately more important as part of the overall employment picture, is the jobs that have to do with human interaction, which is services. So it's not surprising that public sector unions therefore become more and more significant as part of the overall union movement. So this is a reality which we will have to face, not just now, but in an ongoing way. There's some talk in paragraph 158, like talking about the gig economy, and so we know that a lot of jobs, there's a lot of precarious work, part-time work, a lot more jobs like as Uber drivers, and a lot fewer full-time permanent jobs with any kind of job security. And this is partly technological, right? This is partly just because of the development of the apps, right? Like where Uber is essentially there's no physical plant to it at all. It's just an app, right? That inserts itself between the suppliers and the consumers of the services. But it is not automatic that means that those jobs must be precarious, part-time, devoid of any benefits, ununionized. That's still a political and a social struggle over whether those workers will be organized and be able to, whether the state will support workers' rights, or whether the state works against workers' rights. And unfortunately, as we know in Canada, the general trend is both federally and provincially is right-wing governments that are moving against union rights. The union rights have never been very strong in Canada in comparison with with a lot of the other more advanced imperialist countries, but it's even more so. Like there's a redoubling of the attack on labor rights and rolling back of those few rights that do exist in a legislative form. And so I'd also like to call your attention to paragraph 152 and 153, where they talk about basically two different approaches within the trade union movement. essentially there's an approach of class collaboration, and then there's an approach of class struggle. Obviously, we're in favor of the class struggle side, but it's also unfortunately the case that in the trade union movement right now, in most unions, the class collaborationist point of view is really very strong. That's the position which is holding the leadership of most unions, where essentially they take a very narrow view that the only thing that unions do is negotiate agreements. They tend to try to negotiate collaborationist agreements, where they're going to give up the feistiness and the fighting character of the union in order to get some kind of an agreement. And they don't see themselves as having any political function. At best, they're kind of contracting out the political work of the trade union movement to the NDP. At the worst, they're not even doing that. They're sort of submitting themselves to the leadership of the Liberal Party. So we, on the other hand, take the point of view that the trade union movement should be much more independent of those political parties, that it should be much more democratic, much more under the control of its own, of the actual membership, the rank and file membership, much more active and proactive in organizing the unorganized, in putting forward social demands, not just small scale negotiation of collective agreements, and much more energetic in terms of the different members of different unions supporting each other, like a general atmosphere of solidarity amongst the unions in Canada and internationally, more solidarity internationally with workers in other countries. So there's a really very stark contrast between the trade union movement, as it unfortunately is right now, and the kind of trade union movement we would like to see, that we think best would represent interests of workers. This is, so this is an area which for our party is always going to be very important, because even at its worst, even the feeblest and most right-wing trade union movement, it is in fact, it's an organization of workers, people organized where they work, and it's going to be important to the working class movement. The character of the trade union movement is going to have a big influence on how the class as a whole can organize itself. So this is always going to be an important issue for us. Okay, and so I'd like to just jump to the final section where it talks about the growth in the party and the development with a lot of new members. And here, like to just focus a little on paragraph 203, where it talks about the club and the importance of the club as a center of political discussion and mentorship, where people learn and develop their skills, learn from experience and learn from talking to each other. And that this is a very important aspect of our party work. And I have to tell you, comrades, those of you who are new in the party, relatively new, that you are in on the ground floor in this, because historically in Alberta, ever since 1992, in the crisis in the party, we were reduced to virtually nothing within Alberta. In 1992, at the point of a formal split in the party, there were 3 party members left in Edmonton. So over quite a long period of time, our growth was very slow. Essentially, we were doing very little political work. It was as much as we could do to just try to keep a kind of skeleton organization ticking over, to have any meetings at all. The situation is different now. And thanks a lot, thanks to many of you new comrades coming in, bringing in a whole new level of energy and capacity. And so we are actually in some ways historically at the beginning stage of developing our clubs as real centers of revolutionary education and revolutionary activity. So what you do is going to make a big difference in creating those, that genuinely vibrant revolutionary center in our clubs. So you're not joining an organization that's already, set in its ways and already fixed in its structures. We're going to be learning how to do this together as we go forward. And I'm very excited, looking forward to what the new comrades are going to bring in, the new perspectives and the new energy that you're going to bring to building the party and building the revolutionary movement. So I'll pause there and just open the floor up for discussion. So we'll keep track of what's in the chat, but also if anybody wants to just raise their hand if there's anything they want to say. So I see Vlada has a hand up. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, all. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great, fantastic. So it's great to meet all of you. I am a labor organizer and I work in the games industry. So that's how I ended up connecting to the party. So my personal goal is to strengthen, the growing need for a pro-worker movement, specifically within the private sector. So it's very good to see that the party has such a strong stance regarding this, because absolutely you're right. There is a massively growing industry, especially the entertainment industry, where the struggle to unionize and the struggle to build a labor movement has begun in, sort of anarchist roots with Game Workers Unite, for example. I was there when that managed to fall apart due to horizontalism and just a lack of proper organization. So seeing as specifically the games industry is as large as it is, and seeing how, for example, with the election of the UCP government, we lost a very important digital tax credit, which would have allowed the companies here to hire Albertan workers and to grow that sector and to diversify our economy, as opposed to relying on noxious fossil fuels that are destroying us, to become more self-reliant, right? So when we look at other industries in that same vein, when we look at film, when we look at animation, they have a very strong union history, which was born out of a very, very similar struggle. And at the core of that struggle was the need to connect contractors, gig workers, and those in temporary positions of employment to the education they need to start radicalizing their workforce. Again and again, the wall I'm running into while trying to organize working liberals is a lack of any kind of education in regards to building a proper social movement. There is a growth and interest in anarchism. There is an interest in anti-work, but as far as having those effective strategies to move forward, to negotiate, to demand our workers' rights, the resources on that are very, very lacking. It's something that I would personally love to bring to the party and to see grow. Is I want to know our view on offering organizer training. I want to know who I can connect to and where I can begin working with this. I'm already in touch with the Gig Workers Unite. But at the ground level, just in Edmonton alone, there are 2 major companies, one of which is under Electronic Arts, a huge conglomerate, another one under Tencent, also a huge conglomerate. And I, just by talking and just by connecting with that community here, I know that there is a lot of interest and a lot of passion, especially with those that are just entering the industry or entering the workforce. And often, they would just come to me. They're like, Vlada, what do I do? And my answer can't just be, well, join the party. I would like to see some kind of active educational effort to start kicking off. I want to see this kind of training offered outside of, the Young Communist League. I want to offer my help and also potentially connect with comrades in other socialist parties, such as the Party for Social Liberation in the United States, who is gaining an immense amount of movement right now and is actually aligned with a lot of our policies. So yeah, I would just like to clarify and strengthen our connection to this labor movement, to gig and contract industry, and I would like to know what we're doing to bring forward this Marxist-Leninist education to the working class.
Okay, well, I think one thing is for sure is that we should put you personally in touch with some of the members of the party trade union commission, which includes, some people who are really, long-term veterans of the trade union movement from other parts of the country. And so that, that you could get the maximum benefit of their knowledge and experience. So I'm making note of that, is that we'll do that as soon as we can. We're not going to wait for the convention to do that. Okay. Okay. So anybody else? I see Jeremy. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, especially Vada. That's something, especially like work in unionizing different sectors of the economy. It is an essential question, I think, for young people coming into the party. In Alberta, I know we're coming on the tailwinds of just over 2 decades of very strong anti-communist vigor. So rebuilding the organs of that struggle is something that I've observed over the last few years that has been a very strong uphill battle. One thing that I would recommend is having out of the trade union commission, there needs to be provincially designated commissions that are focusing in on the labor struggles within each province. And the reason I say this is because the labor movement at large, there tends to be very provincially specific kind of issues because of how the labor aristocracy is designed, like the AFL and the coordination around some of union movements basically. I remember I was working on a drive until I was let go at a nonprofit. I know another member in the Young Communist League in Edmonton here was trying to work on a drive in his grocery store that he was working on. And what I realized in my experience and in others is we are like the young people who are entering the workforce today in the province of Alberta specifically is what I can speak to. We are we're within the communist movement, the first people in a couple of decades that have been pushing this struggle forward and trying to tread new ground on it. And so the type of educational work in the party, I think, needs to there needs to be provincial commissions that can dedicate ourselves to the work that different sectors are struggling in our respective provinces and being able to support each other in what we're learning in these struggles alongside each other. So thank you.
Anybody else? I'm sure somebody must have something to say about all of this. Okay, so well, I'll put a question out there, because we do have comrades here from several different locations, is that that people tell us, comrades tell us what's happening in your work, like in terms of what's the state of the various different mass movements that the party wants to be involved with, like the women's movement, indigenous struggles, environmental movement, LGBTQ, whatever kinds of education, whatever those movements are that you are involved with. This could be a sort of a good opportunity to kind of fill each other in on what's going on in the different cities. So if anybody wants to talk about about their own work in this context. So I see Ian's hand is up. So Ian, go ahead.
So I can talk about that, but I just wanted to mention. So I didn't review the document as close to this time, but I was wondering if there was any mention of the, I believe it was the Boilermakers in Edmonton. That's been a very long ongoing strike that had a lot of, I guess, really, from what I could tell, negative interactions with COVID relief, where the employer was basically given resources to either extend or break the strike. And I feel like that's like a dynamic that might be worth addressing, where the government solutions to one problem directly affects the labor movement in a really negative way. And then I guess so I think that's important. And then my other point, I guess, is for working in tech broadly. I think there are lots of people that are very sympathetic to the labor movement. They are probably not communists, but I think there is ground to organize there, and it might not be for wages or working conditions, but I definitely think, especially when it comes to things like tech and AI and these more senior positions, a lot of people really don't want to do things like do contract work for the government for weapons programs and things like that. So there's been successful, I guess, things like walkouts and different actions like that in the States of people refusing to do contracts with the DHS or with weapon contractors. And I think that's a place to grow and move on, and maybe actually try and get people thinking more in terms of labor movement instead of just being upset and saying no to one action. It should try and move that into broader organization of the industry.
Anybody else? So,
Jill has her hand raised.
sorry, who was it?
Jill.
Oh yeah, okay, go ahead.
Hi. Okay, so there's a few of us in terms of what's ongoing work that we're doing here in Calgary. There's several of us who have been involved in Community Solidarity YYC, and that was countering the trucker freedom, whatever you want to call them, fascist protests. That work is ongoing because, as we all know, they're not stopping. It's become more of a circus and a community than, I guess, what, now that all the mandates are gone, they're not really protesting anything per se, but we are thinking that these are still kind of recruitment grounds for the fascists, and continuing to try and come up with things, because it's so much harder now. It's they're just having these every Saturday still, this has been going on for 2 years, having their little rallies or whatever. And it's now that they're not marching down the Beltline and disturbing a residential neighborhood, it's kind of harder to figure out exactly what the kind of messaging can be to, get rid of these people. Because I mean, at the end of the day, everyone's, well, they have the right to, be out there and, voice their opinions, blah, blah. But as we all know, that these are, fascist recruitment rallies. So we're still trying to get creative with how to, put this all down. And then there is another group that has started kind of surveilling the police that I am involved in. And we, right now we're just, gathering information, and hopefully eventually, the idea is to expose, I mean, we all know this, but, expose what a waste of money they are for the city and for the community, and that they're doing more harm than they are good. And then also in terms of the Indigenous movement, I'm involved in Bear Clan here, which is not really, I mean, I try and chat to people about more overtly political things, but it is mostly, just hands-on, going out into the community and helping the helping the unhoused population, as well as offering an alternative to the police, because the police group and Bear Clan are intimately connected in terms of who the organizers are. So Bear Cline's offering an alternative to calling the police for a variety of different situations. And I think one of the leaders of Bear Cline is, yeah, I feel like she is becoming more kind of like overtly kind of politically active and stuff. And so, yeah, just working within all of those at the minute. That's what's going on in Calgary, I guess. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't think there is anybody else here that's doing other stuff, but I might be wrong. That's all.
Very good. Okay. Anybody else? Maybe somebody from Edmonton like to report on, you know, some of the things that are happening here. Good. Jeremy, Alex?
Hey, comrades. I don't want to take up too much space. I know there's a lot of other people. I want to just jump on Ian's point though. What you're talking about, I think when you're referring, yeah, the stuff in Alberta, line 127 is where it's talking about that. I'm gonna write like a more broader statement on this, but what I think is reported in line 127 does really good at reporting on like the attacks against post-secondary as well as the layoff of workers, but it doesn't interact very much with the legislation that's going on around with labor, which I think will have a lot far further reaching impacts on workers in Alberta. So like bills like Bill 1, Bill 32, Bill 72, you know, Bill 36, you know, a number of bills that have restricted the ability for unions to negotiate fair contracts for workers, bills that have pulled money right out of, you know, like under the feet of like public housing, taken union leaders off the healthcare boards that were able to negotiate contracts. All these issues kind of like accumulate into like more ability for a gig economy to function a lot more vibrantly in our communities, and it drives down wages as a result. My only criticism, I think, with building on to Ian's point with how does legislation interact with workers, condition like the conditions at work at a workplace. Well, you know, the very clear example at Cesco, when Bill 1 and Bill 32 came down the pipeline, you know, people on the picket line in front of the fabrication store there, they weren't able to restrict access to scab workers coming on site. And so that really dissolved any kind of momentum in that movement, and they were able to negotiate a fair contract. They basically had to roll over and just let the employer, you know, take what they wanted. So yeah, I think more needs to be done in that 127 line on interacting between how labor legislation has impacted workplace conditions. But there's broader things to emphasize there.
May I speak? Add to Naomi, Chair?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Well, I exactly like what Vlad and Jeremy and you have said. Can any of them or either of them elaborate on paragraph 127 there and add the CESCO strike, points about the CESCO strike, and add points about the Alberta government's legislation restricting unionization and strikes. And then the second thing I would like Vlada in concert with others to maybe write a resolution for the provincial convention and going on to the central convention, something drawing extra special attention to labor organization in the gig economy. So I would just recommend that be done.
That I can do. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
I could.
Yeah, okay, Jeremy, go ahead.
Maybe the thing to elaborate on, I think a more elaboration can happen maybe in a resolution. But one other thing I'd like to highlight is the contract negotiations and strike of the Cargill workers. They were, you know, some of most of the workers in that workplace were migrant are migrant workers, and they had a very successful campaign as well. So I mean, I think it's a good comparison looking at the Cargill like strike and how they were able to negotiate their contracts with SubW and comparing or CFW. I could mix up that union name, but them and Sesco in very similar conditions, how those labor struggles like developed. I think that's just an interesting thing to follow.
Yes, I think these are all like really fruitful topics where people could and should elaborate more, like work some of these things out in writing that, you know, to send into the bulletin and, you know, to inform the final political report for the convention. So, okay. Anybody else? Let's see. Just double check the chat here. So I'm going to ask, you know, like actually, I'm going to come back to that other question about, you know, that was sort of raised, like talk about the actual work that's going on in the club. So maybe, you know, like Alex, you could talk about what's happening with your club, and I don't know, maybe Ian can talk about what's happening with the other clubs. Can I put you on the spot for that? Alex?
Well, yes, our club has been, you know, we're still kind of adjusting to the pandemic situation and the reorganization we had a while ago. But our club has been focused so far. AUC activity is the main focus of our club. So using the hall as a meeting place for other organizations, for other groups, welcoming other groups, multicultural groups, different performing arts groups, different political groups, even ad hoc groups for events so they can fundraise and just have a space to meet. And then we've been also doing things like just the regular party things like postering, for instance. We want to make that more of a regular activity. We've been coordinating with other groups within the AUC, preparing strategy for working within the AUC at the branch level and the national level, and then just participating in the party campaigns in terms of postering and also in terms of educationals. We participated in some educationals live, presented one on imperialism. What we need to do more, I think, is we started having new members attending club meetings, the last meeting, and then this upcoming meeting, which will be postponed. So we need to do more to welcome new recruits and to involve in our activities and to help and to have them involve us in their activities. So.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the sort of the politics of within the AUC, about their attitudes about the war and so on?
Yes, well, yeah, this is the war in Ukraine has put us into a difficult position. You know, it reminds me of, I know what it feels like sort of when World War I started in 1914, because we can see that we're under an intense bombardment of propaganda, and it affects us as well, you know, personally. So we kind of had to stay strong and give an alternate voice to the overwhelming mainstream voice in support of NATO. On the other side, in support of escalating the war, sending arms to Ukraine, keeping the war against Russia going, sanctions, etc., etc. So we've been kind of in a defensive posture, I would say. I've been monitoring the rest of the AUC nationally to make sure that there's no kind of weak spots. You know, just it's in a sense, it's easy to do because we've been pushing for peace. So we just want the message of peace, and we've worked with the Edmonton Peace Council and Canadian Peace Congress, they've been a good help. So we just push the message of peace against the message of war. Try not to take sides. Try not to get involved in the arguments of genocide and massacres and all this kind of thing. Trying to keep the focus on peace more than anything else. We've had, like I said, we've issued one statement. I think it's time again to issue another statement at the branch level and the national level, because we early in the conflict we issued statements, and now it's time to issue more statements giving our position and supporting peace and calling for an end to the war.
Yeah, so maybe Jeremy, do you want to talk a little bit about what the Peace Council work is?
Yeah, well, the Peace Council work, I'll just do a very brief synopsis of it. The Peace Council in Edmonton was inactive for the course of the pandemic. Basically, we had one last presenter talking about, you know, the conversation actually, I think in the last education we had in 2019 or 2020 was on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and then the pandemic hit. You know, interestingly enough, we have a conflict brewing that has, you know, has Russia involved in that as well, and you know, the conflict, the development of the international, I guess, block between different polar countries, like with America and the East. So coming out of the pandemic, we hosted a fundraiser raising medical supplies for Cuba. It was on the back of Canadian network on Cuba's needle program. They were sending needles to and syringes to Cuba because that's one of the things that the blockade had been stopping from getting into Cuba. And then out of that, we reorganized in the fall, and we started doing campaign work around the No New Fighter Jet campaign that's been partnered with many organizations across North America, including David Suzuki has supported it. There's been support from Canadian Foreign Policy Institute, Voices of Women for Peace, many organizations, and we were able to host some demonstrations in Edmonton into the winter and the early winter in January. We were working with the Sudanese community in Edmonton, trying to raise awareness around the coup that happened on October 25th and the humanitarian crisis that emerged in that. And as we were developing, you know, some plans on doing some webinars and stuff, the conflict in Ukraine erupted. So it's taken a lot of the energy for talking about peace into that conflict. Even though there's these conflicts like all around the place happening. So Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Palestine, you know, these issues are all, you know, at breaking points in many places. And so we've been walking a line of really promoting peace and concerned about the possibility of high intensity and the possibility of thermonuclear war that can emerge out of the crisis in Ukraine, amongst other things. And so we've been really focusing a lot of attention on that crisis, but still trying to raise attention on these other issues as well. So so we go out and support, you know, demonstrations around Free Palestine and just supporting other peace initiatives in the city of Edmonton. The Canadian Peace Congress has been pretty consistent. Often the only voice in different cities, you know, having rallies that are promoting no war, end the war in Eastern Europe. So being serious about coming to the negotiating table and not sending weapons to escalate the crisis that's unfolding there. So that's a bit of synopsis. We did a rally last Saturday. We're doing a rally this Saturday again at the CBC radio. We've been, you know, regularly picketing at the CBC radio studios in Edmonton, just because the CBC news source has been one of those voices that have just been promoting this war, and and we need to bring attention against that. So that's that.
Maybe Ian, maybe you want to talk a little briefly, tell people about the China Solidarity work.
Yeah. So the China Solidarity Committee has been I guess a big project of the John Corbin Club. So I guess when we first formed, one of the main issues that we were concerned with was the conflict between Canada and China over the detainment of Meng Wanzhou. That has thankfully mostly been resolved. But kind of the ongoing work that we've been doing is to have online forums where we have either a guest speaker from China or a Chinese Canadian give a presentation. So topics we covered were we had a professor from China give a presentation about Norman Bethune. It's a very famous in China, party member who was also just a very important figure in terms of Canada and China potentially having a better relationship. So we got a presentation about that, and then our other forum was with a Canadian author, William Derry, who wrote a book about basically being Chinese in Canada and kind of the institutional and racist policies that he had to grow up and deal with, and his parents did, and kind of the things that have changed over the years and what they've done to fight against that, and what remains to be done. But the purpose of those is just to provide a place for Chinese Canadians to see that there's people that support them, and to kind of unite them, because there's lots of different little groups around Canada that are all kind of doing the same thing. So we now have a pretty good set of connections to these different groups and to promote these events. So we've had good attendance at those. We also have now our Chinese movie night, where we've been showing, we've only had one so far, but we have another one coming up where we've shown a Chinese movie, and we're going to show a Chinese documentary, just as a bit of a cultural exchange, and get people to see some things that are happening in China that they probably would not see in any other way. But those events are well attended, so it's a great place to promote other stuff that the party and clubs are doing. And yeah.
Want to give, what's the date of that next movie coming up?
I will get that in 1 second here. So it is on May 28th, and I just need to get the time. So 1 second.
Yeah, we'll be sending out some email.
I'll put the details in the chat. You don't have to wait for me.
Great. Okay. So, okay. So, in some ways, it seems like different clubs are somewhat specializing in different areas, and I think maybe again, putting you on the spot here, Jeremy, maybe you want to tell us just a little bit about what's going on with the YCL, locally and around the province.
Yeah, the Communist League, we have been trying to organize across the province. So in Calgary, Sam Green has been a very dedicated comrade organizing, trying to initiate a club there. There's been work in other areas as well. Like we've tried to do recruitment tours in Three Hills and Medicine Hat and Lethbridge without a lot of success. Mostly it's just been a Calgary and Edmonton center. And so yeah, like there is broader kind of province-wide solidarity. We're trying to just build the youth movement, support different issues that are arising. In Edmonton, we've organized in 4 different committees. So we have successfully now formed a campus club now. So we're at the University of Alberta, and we're also at large in Edmonton. We have a propaganda committee, so making posters, statements, and stuff like that, running social media. We have solidarity committees, like pushing our campaigns to the public eye and supporting other aligned campaigns. And we've been working on developing a curriculum to use across the province, like sharing educational work between Calgary and Edmonton. And we've missing ones here in my head. But anyways, our focus is really just trying to build up broader youth movements, support the student movement, support young workers, and a lot of young workers, like I mentioned already, like are actively involved in the workplaces, trying to organize union involvement there. And we're just trying to provide as much support as we can, and developing the networks within the trade organizations that we have. Sam here has also been very active in housing struggles as well, organizing with tenants with Acorn, and that work has also been coming up into Edmonton as well, and we're trying to build a broader tenant organizing campaign in both cities here. So yeah, lots of good work. A lot more I could talk about, but I don't want to talk too much. So.
Okay, so Justin has a hand up. So Justin, and then after that, Sam. So.
Yeah, so here in Calgary, we have a Peace Congress membership forming kind of on the club level. And we're just kind of trying to establish the framework of how that should function kind of in the grander scale of things, like within the party and within the whole of the Peace Congress itself. So far, like I've just been involved for about a week, 2 weeks now, so I'm just kind of getting my feet wet here. So I'm just kind of reaching out to kind of find out historically, like how is this, the framework and the architecture of this worked, like what sorts of things were accomplished, as well as just like on the provincial level or the club level, like how like people have found success with organizing these sorts of things, because what we've got so far right now is we've got a Discord going, which seems to be working really well for just compiling information. I know one of our comrades who's not here on the call with us right now, Morgan, has drafted a sort of a foreign policy document, kind of pointing out some of the contradictions.
Okay, Justin, are you done? Okay, I'm not.
Sorry, I just realized I somehow muted myself. What was the last thing that I said?
I think the last thing you said was contradictions.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, like I said, we have one comrade Morgan, he's not on the call right now, wrote a document. Yeah, I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to say too much or get too deep into it because I'm just getting involved right now, but I'm basically just reaching out to see if like anyone can point us in a direction of how we can expand this. If anyone else has had any success with recruiting in certain areas and how other clubs are organizing. So far, we're using a Discord server, which seems to work well for compiling information and just getting our lines of communication going like at a faster rate. That's pretty much all I had to say. I'm just basically trolling for information.
Okay, yeah, so Jeremy's put his email address in the chat there for you, Justin. So he'd be the first point person for the Edmonton Peace Council. So, so next is Sam. Go ahead.
Hey, just checking that you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yep, excellent. Okay, sorry, my headphones can sometimes be a bit tricky. So yeah, I just wanted to expand on what Jeremy and Justin have both said regarding some of the work going on in Calgary at the minute. Yeah, Jeremy and myself have been talking quite a lot about connecting Edmonton and Calgary on educational issues, and starting to, I suppose, centralize some of the work that's been going on. yeah, we started a monthly educational that Ivan, the General Secretary for the YCL, has been sitting in on and assisting us with. And the main struggle that we've been having down here in Calgary at the minute is maintaining a steady flow of applicants. We get big bursts of applicants, especially from universities, but we haven't been able to form a university club because people just don't keep up with the applications. Essentially, like we'll get an application, we'll reach out. Sometimes we'll get an email back. But then 9 times out of 10, that's as far as it goes. So I feel that one thing that we could be doing is just kind of figuring out more efficient recruiting methods than just email. Because yeah, I feel like there's some stuff that we can do to standardize the way that we recruit people and the way that we take in applicants, which is something that has been worked on lately. Naomi and Jonathan have both discussed amongst themselves kind of making sure that the YCL gets the first pick of applicants under 30, which is fantastic because it was something we were really struggling with, noticing that applicants under 30 were just kind of going straight to the party. And the YCL, with its, limited age range, the limited funds that we have, all that sort of stuff, it was quite a drag trying to organize, and it still is. Young people today, as we've discussed earlier, they have very unstable schedules, very unstable incomes, and it's making organizing very difficult, which is why I was so glad to see in the convention bulletin towards the end, the fact that, the party is reasserting the need to support the YCL and not kind of treat the YCL as a reserve body of, energy to expend. Ivan and Jeremy and myself discussed at some length some frustrations that we had with the party, kind of in some areas, at least, not so much here in Alberta, or in Calgary rather. But yeah, the party kind of commandeering a lot of the young YCL members, leading to burnout and leading us down kind of a dead end road where we'd get applicants, 1 out of 10 would stick around, and then that 1 out of 10 would end up burnt out because they were split between party work and league work. So yeah, a proposition that I would like to make and to send in as part of our contributions to the bulletin is reasserting, maybe that this has already been submitted. I haven't had time to read the new submissions, but just kind of making sure that the work that goes on between the party and the Young Communist League, it stays respectful of the boundaries between the two. Because we hear a lot in the YCL that, we're assured we're not just a holding pen for the party, but that doesn't always turn out to be the case when it comes down to the actual work that we do with the party. So I feel like expanding that to have more concrete parameters where not just recruitment, but actual party work and league work have a stronger distinction, so that we can get young comrades to stick around in the YCL, so that we can get them educated, because as the bulletin says, this is where young people learn to struggle and struggle to learn. And we can provide a much more, given our smaller membership, we can give a much more focused kind of education that young communists need in order to develop into potent comrades, basically. It was a bit rambly, do apologize, but yeah, I would like, if anyone here is in the YCL and the party, to maybe discuss what parameters we could include as actual concrete boundaries between the YCL and their party.
Yeah, very much so, Sam. Very important point. I want to jump in here and talk a little bit. Like, actually, Jeremy and I just kind of talked about that a little bit yesterday already. Like, I think it's really important that we don't, that we're not draining the resources of the YCL. Over the long term, the party is going to get much more benefit from a strong and growing YCL rather than, grabbing every promising young organizer or young activist and starting to put them to work on party campaigns. So, but in more general terms, not just between the YCL and the party, but even, more generally, I think the party as a whole, we have to take seriously like that we need to be disciplined in our division of labor. Like the various comrades have already talked this evening about many different kinds of different campaigns that are going on. And this is not a new problem. I remember similar discussions way back in the 80s when I was one of the young new recruits, where everything is the most important thing, right? Every new issue that comes up is the one that everybody should jump onto. Everybody should go to all the demonstrations. And we're like comrades in all good faith, when they had an assignment and they were working in a particular area, they become deeply invested in it. To them, it does become the most important thing. And they really do feel as if everybody should drop everything else and just work in that organization or on that issue. But of course, that's not so, right? So obviously we want people to be strongly committed to their work and conscientious and involved with whatever movement it is they are working in. But at the same time, that we have the discipline, we have the ideological sophistication, that we understand how our own particular area of work relates to an overall larger strategic struggle for socialism. That what we want to do is we want a movement of movements. We want to see these movements, in fact, coalesce into one broad revolutionary movement. And that, but that we trust our comrades as well, right? That we do our own work, and we know that we rely on other comrades to do work in other areas, and that we have the discipline to stick to our jobs and try to do just a small number of things well, rather than doing dozens of things badly. So some of this is just kind of, it's not even ideology as much as psychology, right? Like about how people become very excited about what they're doing and think everyone else should be excited about the same things. But it has a very important strategic component that we be thinking about our work within the context of the larger goals of a larger revolutionary movement. So circling back around, I do think of the YCL as a potential pool of recruitment to the party, but over the long term, that what we want to do is strengthen the YCL as a movement in its own right, because the best way in the long term to get really good recruits with really good experience into the party is that there be a really strong youth movement in which people have developed their skills and gained experience. So we have to, that's one of the ways in which we need to be disciplined and not poach from the YCL, not drain off YCLers into strictly party campaigns. Okay. So I see Jeremy's hand up again. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, just a very quick point. I echo what Sam's talking about. I think he articulated what I would have said too, and that the struggle of the YCL is we have to recognize that, like, I think this last section talking about growing the YCL is really optimistic section. It's talking about increased growth in the YCL, and I think we have to really look at the growth in a very regionally way, because like there's, for instance, significant growth in like the greater Toronto area. There's significant growth in the Victoria area. there's you know, there's regions in Canada where you have big growth areas, and then you have different regions that are really struggling. And to think of recruitment, like I think there's both a capacity kind of development within the clubs that you have to build, and a recruitment strategy of being able to outreach and engage people. It's a both and kind of question, and our involvement in mass movements as well. So there's multiple areas that I think we have to analyze when we're looking at, you know, how the YCL is actually doing as an organization. One criticism I've brought up to the Central Committee in the YCL is in our central executive, just under the Central Committee, we haven't met in over a year, and I think that's a significant problem. I think that represents across Canada. There's organizers who come and go through the YCL and lose capacity to be able to be effective organizers in their respective cities, and it really impedes our ability to develop our campaigns when we can't meet centrally. So that's a great criticism that I've brought out to the Central Executive, and we will be meeting soon, I think, with the Central Committee, but that's one struggle. One thing specific to this document I want to say very quickly is the fact that the student youth in campus commission did not function throughout the pandemic years, and I think this issue is an important issue to analyze too, because if we're gonna have good cohesion between the party and the Young Communist League, we need to be able to have youth in the Young Communist League being able to speak directly to issues affecting the Young Communist League within the party. Because I don't think that's going to be like just a document that's going to be able to dictate, like, you know, how the health and the survivability of the YCL will be. It needs to be a dynamic conversation between the both organizations on every level, from central executive to just basic membership. And I think a commission would build that bridge for us to do that. So that's all I have to say with that. That's in the line 215 and 219 of the board.
Did you want to speak, Alex?
Please, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just want to second Jeremy's statement there that not the answer, but an answer to these problems which Jeremy and Sam have identified is that the Youth and Campus Commission has to function. And I think when we send people or vote for people in the Central Committee and as alternates, we have to make sure they have a kind of a mandate, or at least a desire to get that commission functioning. That's all I would say.
Sorry, okay. Anybody else? Don't see any hands up right now. Okay, once again, circling back around, if if you wish at this point that, to discuss any other subjects, you would not have to stick only to these particular points that have been raised, but if there's anything else within this document that you want to, to bring up as another area of focus, please feel free to do that now. Okay, well, I want to go back and talk a bit about the problem of recruitment and retention. Like it's not just a problem for the YCL. I mean, it's a problem within the party to a greater or lesser extent in many parts of the country about even just keeping up with the potential new recruits, the number of people who click on the button on the website saying, I'm interested in joining the party. Now, some of those people are just like, they're surfing the web, late at night on a very sort of superficial level, say, oh, that's kind of interesting. I'll click on that one. Some of them, it's a really, it's a thoughtful, serious decision that they want to become involved. So we don't know from the start which are which, right? So, but we really do, we scramble even to keep up with the the process of making the initial contact with these people, like following up, like with an email locally. What happens is that every now and then from the central office in Toronto, they'll send out a batch of these of the contact information that people have filled in when they click on that button on the website to the local areas. So we get the ones for Alberta. So even just to keep up with, you know, making a phone call, talking to them, figuring out, you know, whether there's any, you know, real serious intent there, and then then the problem of inviting them to meetings and to become involved with the work. I have to say, frankly, I just don't feel like we've really solved the problem of how to do that in pandemic conditions. You know, I mean, here we are, you know, talking on a Zoom meeting, and I think we're having a good discussion, but it takes work, right? It takes some time and practice, and it's harder for us to get to know each other and to get to know a batch of new people online than it is if you can actually be meeting in person. Like the going for a beer after a meeting factor doesn't, you know, hasn't come into play much over the last couple of years. And so you know, this is a problem that we have to grapple with. How to respond with reasonable promptness, how to actually integrate people in to the party, the ones who are serious about it, and how to make the most of that, like to find out what their interests and talents are, and, you know, what area of work it would be best for them. It's, you know, it's something of a novelty for the party, for us to have so many of them, that it's a struggle for us to keep up with the, you know, with the influx of new members. But so it's pretty important that we, you know, we make it a priority to solve that problem. So I see Jonathan's hand up, so go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, Naomi. Sorry for the delay there. They have the option to lower your hand in the group chat, but not to turn on your mic. So it's kind of weird. But I just want to affirm what you were just saying, Naomi. In my experience in this, the pandemic, it seems that we have better, well, there's two things. I found that during the pandemic, the people who have stuck around the most have been ones who were in group online meetings, and on individual basis, meeting in person are by far the people who are most likely to come to the meeting you invite them to and stick around, as I've experienced in just recent experience with influx of people. I wonder if to help gauge or to properly gauge if a new applicant is available, I wonder if maybe the age spectrum that they give, I mean, they give like 20 to 30 and then 30 to 50. I wonder if maybe for the lower end, they might want to gauge that a little bit lower, like 25 or under or something, just might give it a little bit better handle. I mean, age is only one thing. We could have comrades who are far older, but have very little understanding of Marxism, and in that sense is more akin to being in the YCL type setting as like a student, and have to learn about, you know, to deepen their understanding of Marxism. And then we can have many young people in the party who are very well read and have, you know, just read everything and are, you know, really, you know, chomping at the bit and want, you know, shared experience or, you know, actual on hands experience at organizing and whatnot, as comrades here have already vocalized in many different areas. So yeah, in my experience, I've always, if I see, you know, I try to read the information the party sends me or whatnot, and, you know, it also really entails that the applicant fills out some more information, like sometimes, like if I see a student and it's university, bam, automatically I send that to Sam right away. There's no question asked. But any other, without that information, it's hard for me as an organizer to really discern where they can go until I actually talk to them in person. And then that can be a little bit awkward, saying, well, would it be more enlightened or more willing to go to our YCL or whatnot. And so, yeah, that can be a little bit of an awkward transition, and don't want to feel like you're pushing them away, that the YCL is some substandard organization, because it's not. It's and on that point, I just don't know, we really should be looking at trying to not using the YCL as resources, but in fact supporting the YCL's resources for them. And that when the point is to get these people, to get our comrades in the YCL taking the initiative, being leaders and whatnot, and then supporting them with actual labor. And so I think, I don't know if it's really barriers per se, but actually, comrades in the CPC shouldn't always be feeling like we're the ones who should be telling the YCL what to do or whatnot, but we should be, when these people get organized and show leadership, is to support them in their work as well. And hopefully they will support us in ours. It's give and take. That's all I want to say.
All right, anybody else? Don't see any hands up right now. Don't see anything in the chat. Oh, okay. Okay. So we've been going. Okay, so we've been going for about an hour and a half. Just give another couple minutes in case anyone wants to, has any final thoughts that they want to throw in, or any. But I will, remind you again, comrades, like how important it is to write contributions for the pre-convention discussion, and to submit them for the bulletin for pre-convention discussion. That when you look at the document, it describes it gives the email address to submit your submissions to. So and how important it is as well, like to write proposed resolutions to submit to our provincial nominating meeting on June 5th to actually be able to vote on and then forward resolutions from that nominating meeting to the Central Convention. So although it's, according to our Constitution, it's possible for individuals to submit resolutions. In practice, the resolutions that are going to go to the top of the list, that are going to gain the most attention and be, where they're going to make some time for the processing of them, will be the ones that have been through the process of being voted on and approved by either a club or a provincial or regional nominating meeting, because then we know that those resolutions have the support of more than just one person, that they've got a collective approval. So it is, I really do urge comrades to, if there's other issues they want to bring up, or any of these issues we've talked about that they want to develop more fully, to write them out in those, either for the discussion bulletin, or as resolutions. And so we'll hope that we'll have a very interesting and productive discussion, for our sort of wrap-up discussion then for this will be June 5th at our provincial nominating convention. I'll just remind you as well that those who are elected as delegates have their way paid to the convention by our collective funds, so that those who wish to put their names forward, who would be interested in being delegates, you must have been a member for at least a year. But also, nobody is going to be disqualified because they couldn't afford it personally. There will be, your travel expenses will be paid. And there's also billeting arrangements being made in Toronto for the convention. So as soon as we've got our delegates elected, they've got forms to fill out to register as delegates, and including requests for billeting if you would like, to ask for a place to stay while you are in Toronto for the convention. And of course, even those who are not delegates, alternates and observers are of course welcome to come to actually come. They would not have their way paid. But I'm also hoping that we will in fact have this, or at least a large part of this convention, central convention broadcast, that it will be available as a Zoom meeting or a Facebook or YouTube, by some mechanism anyway, that people all across the country will actually be able to log in and observe the convention from wherever they are. So I'm really hoping that in fact this is going to be one of those that will have a very high level of participation from all across the country. So, okay, Jeremy, go ahead.
Yeah, not Jeremy, but Alex. But Naomi, can we get some information on other party members in terms of their time in the party? Because I think we have a lot of good, young, excellent comrades and new comrades that I'm unfamiliar with. I'd just like to know who is available to be sent as a delegate to the convention in terms of being a member of the party for at least a year, and then who's available as a potential central committee member. So who's been in the party for 2 years. I'd like that information so I could make a decision before the convention happens.
Yes, okay, yeah, we're going to refer this back to the clubs, right? Like, I'm going to ask each club to actually look, to go back and double check like their notes, who joined when, so we know exactly who officially has been a member for at least a year at the point of June 5th of the nominating date, and who's been a member for at least 2 years. And then we would like, I'll go out on a limb and say, let's make that will be the deadline for that information be the 29th as well, when we'll try and put all this information together so that we have the list, so that we can, and what we're asking each club to do actually, more seriously, is to have an honest discussion amongst themselves about who would make a good delegate, who the club thinks should be delegates. Since we only have 3 from Alberta, that means that competition may be fierce, right? We know that we have many more than 3 people who would make excellent delegates. We've already seen that in the discussion here right now, this evening. But unfortunately, we can only elect 3 delegates. So we're going to ask each club to consider this question and report this, like this discussion in an open and frank manner for that meeting on the 5th, so that we know who has the support, who has the confidence of their clubs. Because as I say, with the growth we've had in the party, it's no longer the case that every individual knows every other individual in the party, right? So the clubs now must more seriously take on their role as the political centers of political activity and the centers of political analysis. So okay, I'll just ask one more time if there's anybody else who has anything they want to say. Okay, don't see any more hands up. So I guess we can say, call this meeting to a close, and watch your email. We'll send out the reiterating this information about the what we're asking for from the clubs and the dates and so on within a few days. So we'll be talking to you all again, I hope, on the 5th. Good night, all.
Well, thanks, everyone.
Hey, everyone.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.